A retail executive with 28 years in the game walked into a leadership meeting in 2019 and said, without a hint of doubt, "I know our customer. They're not going to buy online. They want to come into the store. Let's bet bigger on physical retail." And you can understand why that confidence felt earned. Nearly 3 decades of watching shoppers, reading trends, seeing what stuck and what disappeared. Pattern recognition stacked on pattern recognition, year after year. He'd seen the next big thing come and go. He'd watched companies chase shiny objects and flame out. So he trusted the thing that had served him well, his instincts. 18 months later, that company filed for bankruptcy protection. The painful part is this: he didn't fail because he lacked experience. He failed because the experience he leaned on had stopped matching the world in front of him. Customers did buy online. They just didn't buy online from his company. Now, contrast that with another leader. A hospital systems CEO in 2021, also seasoned, also respected by her board, also known for good judgment. She had a strong feeling a new service line would work. Her track record told her it was a winner. But before signing off on a $40 million commitment, she asked her team for something that surprises a lot of organizations. She asked for disconfirming evidence. Not confirmation. Not a deck that made the case look clean. She wanted the scenarios where her own confidence would be wrong. She wanted to pressure test her intuition against information she didn't have when the intuition first showed up. That analysis uncovered assumptions about the market that simply didn't hold anymore. So she adjusted. She scaled down the investment, ran pilots in 2 markets first, and brought the risk under control. The pilot failed. But the failure cost $3 million instead of 40. Same level of seniority. Same kind of confidence. Completely different relationship with evidence. Today, that's what we're getting into. The difference between gut instinct and informed intuition, the kind of culture that turns, "I just know," into, "I know, and I've checked," and why even your best leaders still need better inputs. I'm Nakel Nakima, and this is the Intelligence Edge. Joining me today is a 4-guest panel, leaders who work right at the collision point between human judgment and organizational intelligence. They help executives get better without insulting the experience that got them into the room in the first place. First, Dr. Lian Zhou. She advises senior executives across Asia-Pacific on integrating AI into strategic decision-making, and she's seen firsthand how culture shapes whether leaders treat evidence like fuel or like a threat. Lian, welcome back.
Thank you, Nakel. This topic might be the most important one we can cover, because it sits underneath every other capability.
Next is Maria Alvarez, a data governance leader who has seen something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Organizations can have great data and still make awful decisions, if the culture doesn't actually respect evidence. Maria, welcome.
Thanks, Nakel. I've lived this problem up close, so I'm excited to dig in.
We're also joined by Jonas Richter, a data ethics and compliance specialist. Jonas works with leaders on those high-stakes moments when you have to decide when to trust systems, when to override them, and how to do it responsibly. Jonas, glad you're here.
Happy to be here. This is the kind of conversation that affects real outcomes: financial, operational, and ethical.
And finally, Kwame Mensah, an intelligence systems architect who's built decision intelligence capabilities across Africa, often in environments where intuition has to carry more weight because historical data may be limited or the market itself is new. Kwame, welcome.
Thanks, Nakel. I'm looking forward to exploring the nuance here, because people oversimplify this topic.
Let's start with one defining question to set the frame. When we say, informed intuition, what do we actually mean? Lian, kick us off.
I think of informed intuition as pattern recognition that has been refreshed with current reality. Intuition is basically compressed experience. It's thousands of observations distilled into a sense: something feels right, something feels off. That's incredibly valuable. But the catch is that intuition is tied to the conditions where it was learned. So informed intuition takes that same foundation and deliberately calibrates it against new information. It asks, my gut says X. What does the evidence say today? Where might my patterns be outdated? What am I missing? It's not intuition versus data. It's intuition upgraded with data.
Maria, how do you hear that phrase?
For me, it's intellectual humility turned into a repeatable practice. The strongest leaders I've worked with have real instincts, and at the same time they hold the possibility that those instincts could be wrong. So informed intuition is trusting your judgment enough to form a hypothesis, and distrusting it enough to test that hypothesis before the organization pays the full price.
Jonas?
I would describe it as keeping decision-making human, while making use of what machines do well. Algorithms can scan more data than we can, spot subtle patterns, and avoid certain biases that humans fall into. But they don't truly understand context, they don't manage ambiguity the same way, and they don't make moral judgments. So informed intuition means the human still owns the decision, but with better inputs that sharpen their judgment instead of replacing it.
Kwame, bring us home.
I think of it as wisdom strengthened by evidence. Wisdom is the ability to act well in messy situations, where things are complex, where information is incomplete, where incentives and human behavior matter. Evidence gives you information, but information alone doesn't create wisdom. When you combine the two, you get a leader who can navigate ambiguity and still be anchored to reality. And that leader will almost always outperform either a purely instinctive leader without evidence or a purely analytical person without wisdom.
For different angles, but one common thread, we're not picking a side between experience and evidence. We're talking about designing a relationship between them. So let's move into the tension. If this combination is so powerful, why is it so hard? Why does gut instinct keep winning inside organizations, and when does it start to fail? Lien, why do experienced leaders lean so heavily on intuition?
Because it works often enough that it becomes self-reinforcing. A seasoned leader has made thousands of calls. They've seen outcomes. Their brain learns patterns automatically. So when a new situation shows up, the brain tries to match it to what it has seen before and produces a feeling, sometimes before the leader can even explain the reasoning. That speed is a superpower. And in stable environments, where you get clear feedback and the rules don't change much, expert intuition can be very accurate. But those conditions are narrower than people realize. You need stability. You need reliable feedback. And you need the present situation to actually resemble the past. When those break, when the environment shifts, when feedback is delayed or noisy, intuition can become dangerous. And the scary part is that bad intuition feels like good intuition. The internal sensation is the same.
So you can be confidently wrong and not feel any difference.
Exactly. Your opening story illustrates it. That retail executive built intuition in a world where the store was the center of gravity and digital was a side channel. Then the world moved. Digital behavior stopped being a supplement and became the default for many customers. His mind was matching patterns to a reality that no longer existed. But his confidence stayed high, because the cognitive mechanism didn't announce, by the way, your training data is outdated. Psychologists call part of this the illusion of validity, feeling sure even when the foundation for being sure has gone missing.
Maria, take this from the individual level to the organizational level. How does culture turn shaky intuition into a company-wide decision problem?
There are a few patterns that show up again and again. One is the story organizations tell themselves: seniority equals wisdom. If you've been here the longest, your voice automatically carries the most weight, even if the environment has changed and that experience is less relevant. Another pattern is that leaders, like all humans, tend to look for confirmatory information. If the leader's instinct is already set, the organization learns to bring them data that supports it, and to hide or soften data that challenges it. The intelligence function becomes a validation factory instead of a truth-seeking function. Then you have survival bias. People remember the wins, the times the leaders got paid off, and they quietly forget the losses, or they explain them away as bad luck or unexpected conditions. The mental scorekeeping is unfair. And finally, speed pressure. Intuition is fast. Evidence takes time. If the culture rewards speed above all else, it accidentally rewards unexamined instinct.
So even if a leader wants to get better inputs, the system around them is training everyone to perform agreement.
Yes. And the leader may not even realize it's happening because the team gets very good at it.
Jonas, bring in the cognitive side. What biases are doing the most damage in these situations?
A few are particularly relevant for executives. Anchoring is huge. The first impression or early information sticks. Even when new evidence should change the view, people don't update enough. Availability bias matters too. Leaders overweight the examples they can recall easily, especially vivid failures or recent events. One dramatic story can override base rates. Overconfidence is a consistent executive risk. A lot of research shows that experts, not just novices, can be overconfident in predictions. Ask someone for a 90% confidence range, and you'll often see outcomes landing outside that range far more than 10% of the time. And sunk cost is brutal in organizations. Once you've invested reputation, money, and identity in a direction, it becomes psychologically difficult to reverse. Experience doesn't eliminate these biases. Sometimes success amplifies them because winning makes you trust your judgment even more.
Kwame, do these dynamics change in the environments you work in, where markets may be newer and data may be thinner?
The biases are human, so they're universal. But the context changes the way they show up. In some places, you genuinely can't rely on decades of data because the market, the technology, or the consumer behavior didn't exist decades ago. So intuition is not a preference, it's a necessity. That creates an interesting situation. There's often more acceptance of judgment calls because everyone understands the limits of the data. But there's also sometimes less legacy intuition to get stuck in. A leader might not have 30 years of patterns that are now obsolete. The best leaders I see treat evidence building as a strategic priority. They instrument their businesses, their operations, their customer journeys to generate the data that will calibrate intuition over time. They're basically saying, my instincts are necessary today, but I'm going to build the evidence base that makes my instincts better next year.
Let me throw a question into the room that some listeners are probably thinking. If intuition can mislead us this badly, why not just decide with data? Why not let analytics and algorithms drive the calls?
Because data and algorithms fail too, and often in ways that are harder to notice. Models learn from the past. If the past contains bias or outdated structures, the model will reproduce them. And algorithms aren't good at regime changes. If the world shifts in a way that isn't represented in the training data, you can get confident, precise outputs that are simply wrong. Also, algorithms optimize what you define. If your objective function is misaligned, the algorithm will achieve the wrong goal very efficiently. That's where human judgment should intervene.
And from an ethics lens, systems can be gamed. People learn what signals the model rewards and then manipulate those signals. Humans can sometimes detect when something doesn't feel right, when the numbers are too perfect, when incentives are misaligned, when a story doesn't hang together. The goal isn't to remove humans. It's to reduce unforced errors by improving the quality of what humans are reacting to.
So the answer is not gut only or data only. The answer is culture. A culture that doesn't romanticize instinct and doesn't worship dashboards either. Let's define what that culture looks like. What are the signs you're in an organization where intuition gets upgraded instead of defended? Maria, give us the markers.
I look for 5. First, humility at the top. Leaders say, out loud, I'm not sure, and I was wrong, and this evidence changed my mind. Not as a performance, but as a habit. Second, dissent is safe. People can challenge leadership views without paying for it later. The organization treats dissent like a contribution, not insubordination. Third, decisions are documented with reasoning. Not just what was decided, but why. What evidence was used, what assumptions were made, and what would cause the team to reconsider. Fourth, outcomes are reviewed without blame. When results aren't what you expected, the question isn't, who messed up? It's, what did we believe? What happened? What should we learn? And fifth, evidence is accessible. Data isn't locked away in a priesthood. People who are responsible for decisions can see relevant information and challenge interpretations. When those five are present, you have a chance to build informed intuition at scale.
Lien, if an organization doesn't have those markers, where do you start? Because, change the culture, is easy to say and hard to do.
You start with visible behavior, not slogans. Culture shifts when people observe leaders interacting with information differently. If the CEO walks into a meeting and says, "Tell me what I might be wrong about," that changes everything. If the CEO says, "Here's my view, prove me right," that also changes everything, just in the opposite direction. So I advise leaders to pick the next meaningful decision and run it using a different pattern, publicly. Ask for disconfirming evidence. Thank the person who brings it. Show how it affected the decision. Document the reasoning. Then review the outcome openly. You do that repeatedly, and people learn what the new standard actually is. One moment of a senior leader changing their mind because of evidence does more than 100 speeches about being data-driven.
Kwame, how do you make that cultural shift durable? Meaning, it doesn't depend on one heroic leader being unusually self-aware.
You build it into the machinery. One tool is a decision template. For major calls, require a structure, the hypothesis, the supporting evidence, the contradicting evidence, the key assumptions, and the metrics you expect to move. If you can't fill the template, you're not ready to commit. Another is the pre-mortem. You say, imagine it's a year from now and this failed. What caused it? That pulls risks into the room before money is spent. Then you need an outcome review cadence. Every significant decision gets a scheduled follow-up. 30 days, 90 days, whatever makes sense. Did reality match our expectation? Decision journals are powerful too. Leaders record predictions and confidence levels. Over time you build an internal calibration dataset, and that humbles people in a productive way. And I'm a big believer in funding dissent. A red team shouldn't be a volunteer activity. Give it a budget. Make it legitimate.
Jonas, I want to focus on one tricky part Maria hinted at. You can have evidence and still not have updating. You can have information and yet minds don't change. How do you design for actual learning?
You have to accept something uncomfortable. Once people state a position publicly, they start defending it. It becomes identity. So one technique is to separate evidence review from position taking. Put the data on the table first, then ask for interpretations. Don't start a meeting with, "Here's my view," because after that, everything becomes a debate. Structured analytic techniques help too. For example, forcing teams to compare multiple hypotheses instead of just building a case for the favored one. Forecast accountability also changes behavior. If leaders know their predictions will be revisited, they become more careful and more calibrated. And outside perspectives matter. Internal teams can get captured by the organization's own story. External reviewers or cross-industry voices break that spell. The big principle is this: make it easier socially and cognitively to update than to defend.
Maria, you've made a point in your work that's easy to underestimate. If leaders don't trust the data, none of this works. Talk about that.
Trust is everything. If leaders see broken dashboards, inconsistent definitions, numbers that change depending on who pulled the report, they learn a lesson: data is unreliable. And when they learn that lesson, they retreat into instinct because at least instinct feels coherent. This is why data governance is not just technical hygiene. It's a cultural investment. When data quality is high and issues are corrected quickly and transparently, leaders start to believe evidence is worth consulting. I've worked in organizations with very advanced analytics that nobody used, because the foundation was shaky. And I've worked in organizations with simple metrics that drove great decisions because people trusted the numbers. It's a chain. Trust the data, trust the evidence, trust the process.
Now let's talk about the part nobody wants to say out loud. When you encourage a leader to move from trust your gut to stress test your gut, you're not only changing a process. You're touching identity. For a lot of senior people, their judgment is their brand. How do you do this without turning it into a fight? Lien, what's your approach when you're working with a senior leader who's proud of their instincts, and they should be?
I treat evidence as an amplifier, not a correction. Language matters. If you say, your instinct is wrong, you create resistance immediately. If you say, your instinct is valuable, let's stress test it so we don't miss anything, you build partnership. I also avoid presenting evidence as a weapon. Instead of, this contradicts you, I'll say, here's additional information that could matter. How does it affect your view? And I think it's important to celebrate when evidence supports intuition. Because often it will. That builds a history where analysis is seen as helpful, not antagonistic. Once the leader experiences evidence as an ally multiple times, they're more open when evidence challenges them.
Jonas, what about the leader who just says it plainly, I don't need analysis. I know this market.
Usually that statement is covering something. Sometimes it's a legitimate reaction to bad analysis that was slow, irrelevant, or confidently wrong. In that case, the solution is to demonstrate useful evidence on lower stakes decisions and rebuild credibility. But sometimes it's identity protection. The leader hears, let's look at data, as we don't trust you. Then reframing matters. Evidence-based decision-making is a modern leadership standard, not a remediation plan. Social proof helps too. When leaders see that respected peers and admired companies use structured decision processes, resistance decreases. And sometimes you can make it practical. Fine, trust your judgment. But let's at least agree on what would make us change course later, and what signals we'll watch. That's still progress.
Kwame, let's hit the speed objection. People love to say, we don't have time for analysis.
Sometimes that's real. Often it's a disguise. When it's real, the answer is to invest in decision infrastructure so evidence is fast. If it takes weeks to assemble the basics, teams will default to gut. If it takes hours, they'll use it. High-performing organizations aren't choosing between speed and evidence. They've designed systems so evidence arrives quickly, automated reporting, scenario tools, decision dashboards that are actually relevant. When it's a disguise, when we need to move really means don't question me, then you need standards. Some categories of decisions should not proceed without minimum inputs. Period. And you track outcomes. When rushed decisions keep creating expensive mistakes, you build a record that shows skipping evidence isn't speed, it's debt.
Maria, last resistance pattern, deeply entrenched deference. The kind of organization where challenging a senior leader isn't explicitly forbidden, it's just culturally unsafe. How do you break that?
You have to counter-signal, and you have to do it visibly. Deference cultures aren't maintained by one memo. They're maintained by people watching who gets rewarded and who gets punished. A few practical moves help. Assign a challenger role formally. When it's someone's job to find flaws, challenging becomes legitimate. Create ways to surface concerns without attribution when needed, anonymous channels that feed into decision reviews. And leaders have to get specific when inviting dissent. Not the classic "any objections" that everyone knows is rhetorical. Instead, I want the strongest case against this. Who can build it? Or, Maria, you usually see risks first, what am I missing? Then you tell stories. You make dissent part of the organization's mythology, the time someone challenged the plan and saved millions. And leaders need to admit mistakes publicly and credit the people who saw it coming. That rewires what people believe is safe. This kind of culture took years to build, so it takes sustained effort to change. But every counter-signal counts.
Let's ground all of this in practice. What does informed intuition look like when it's done well, when it's not theory, when it's a real decision with real money and real consequences? Lien, give us a case you've seen where a leader got this right.
A telecommunications executive was considering a major infrastructure investment, over $200 million over 5 years. Her instinct was yes. She understood the competitive landscape, she believed in the technology direction, and her experience suggested this was where the market was going. But instead of pushing it through on confidence, she asked for a decision brief built around her hypothesis. She required 3 sections: evidence that supports the decision, evidence that argues against it, and the assumptions that must be true for success, each with a confidence level. That structure surfaced a blind spot. The plan assumed regulatory approvals would come through as they had in the past. But the regulatory environment had shifted, and approvals were less certain than her intuition assumed. She didn't abandon the investment. Her intuition about the market was mostly right. But she restructured it: smaller initial commitment, staged spending with regulatory milestones as gates, and contingency plans. Regulatory delays did happen. Because she redesigned the commitment, the investment could absorb the delay and still succeed. In the original form, it likely would have failed. That's informed intuition. Experience set the direction, evidence corrected the fragility.
Kwame, flip it. Give us an example where the organization needed to trust human intuition more than the model.
A fintech lending platform in Kenya built credit risk models on limited historical data. The model strongly recommended rejecting a specific customer segment because the historical default rate looked high. But a local team lead pushed back. Her intuition said the data wasn't representing the true story. She knew those customers had recently been hit by a one-time disruption, a drought that affected agriculture in a particular region, and that event distorted the historical repayment patterns. Here's what made it informed intuition rather than just opinion: she didn't simply override the model and scale. She explained the context, proposed a controlled pilot with modified terms, tight monitoring, and an option to stop quickly if she was wrong. The pilot's default rates came in at less than half of what the model predicted. That segment became one of the company's most profitable. The key lesson: the data wasn't bad on purpose. It was context blind. Human judgment brought context, and experimentation turned it into evidence.
Jonas, hardest scenario: intuition and evidence conflict, stakes are high, and there's no time to run the perfect test. What do you do then?
When you can't run an experiment, you can still be disciplined. I recommend making the disagreement explicit in probabilities. Ask the leader, what is the probability your intuition is right? Even though the evidence points the other way, force a number. It changes the conversation from "I'm right" to "I might be right, and here's how sure I am." Then you run an expected value mindset. If your intuition has a 60% chance of being correct, is the downside manageable? Is the upside worth it? Or is the downside catastrophic? Meaning you should follow evidence even if you think it's less likely. And you document the reasoning. Later, when the outcome is known, you can evaluate whether your probability estimates were calibrated. Over time, the leader learns where their intuition is truly strong, and where it's mainly confidence.
Maria, how do you keep this from becoming bureaucratic? Because the moment people hear templates and protocols, they worry about analysis paralysis.
By tiering the rigor. Not every decision deserves the same process. Tier 1, routine, low stakes, reversible decisions. Move fast. Judgment is fine. Tier 2, significant decisions. Require an evidence brief that includes the hypothesis, supporting and contradicting evidence, and key assumptions. Make it time-boxed. Tier 3, strategic, high-cost, hard-to-reverse decisions. That's where you use the full protocol: pre-mortem, red team, scenarios, outcome metrics, and scheduled review. When the organization agrees on tiers, People stop arguing about whether evidence is required. The category determines the standard.
We're coming into the final stretch, so let's switch into something actionable. This show is called The Intelligence Edge, and I want to end with the tactical edge, one concrete action a leader can take this week to move toward informed intuition. Lien, what's your one?
For your next significant decision, write your hypothesis down before you see the analysis. Then review the evidence. Then write, in plain language, whether the evidence changed your view. If it didn't, explain why. That small habit builds the muscle of conscious updating instead of unconscious defending.
Maria?
Pick one recurring decision where you mostly rely on gut today. Next time it comes up, add a single evidence requirement, one metric or one report that must be consulted before you decide. You're not redesigning the whole company overnight. You're inserting one proof point into a familiar pattern.
Jonas?
Start a personal decision journal. For major judgments, record what you think will happen and how confident you are before the outcome. Then revisit later. It's hard to improve calibration without keeping score, and most leaders never keep score.
Kwame?
In your next leadership meeting, assign someone the challenger role explicitly. Their job is to present the strongest case for the opposite decision. Don't ask for volunteers. Make it a role. Then watch what happens when dissent becomes part of the structure instead of relying on personal bravery.
Let me pull the thread through everything we covered today. Gut instinct is not the enemy. It's compressed experience. In a stable environment with clear feedback, it can be powerful. But intuition breaks when conditions change, when feedback was misleading, or when biases distort what we think we've learned. And the most dangerous intuition is the kind that feels certain. At the same time, data and algorithms don't save you automatically. They can carry historical bias forward. They can miss regime changes. They can optimize the wrong thing perfectly. So the goal isn't to replace judgment. The goal is to elevate judgment. That's what informed intuition is, instinct that actively seeks disconfirmation, that calibrates against current evidence, that stays humble about its own accuracy. And to make that work consistently, you need an intelligence culture, leaders who model humility, systems that reward learning, decision templates that force clarity, red teams that legitimize dissent, outcome reviews that close the loop, and data quality that makes evidence trustworthy. Most of all, it requires a human approach to a human problem, framing evidence as support, not insult, and making it socially safe to tell the truth. To our panelists, Dr. Lien Zhou, Maria Alvarez, Jonas Richter, and Kwame Mensah, thank you for the depth and for the practical tools.
Thank you, Nakel. Important conversation.
Really appreciated this one. It's where a lot of organizations get stuck.
My pleasure. Hopefully leaders take the small steps that turn into real change.
Thanks for having us. And I hope people remember this is not philosophy, it's operational.
Next week on The Intelligence Edge, the boardroom brief, Intelligence for Governance. We'll talk about what directors actually need to see, how intelligence should be packaged for oversight rather than management, and why most board reporting fails both audiences at the same time. Until then, I'm Nakel Nikima. Make better decisions.